In this episode, we connect with writers, producers, and actors Chandra and Natasha Chandel. They tell us what it's been like on the ground at the WGA and SAG-AFTRA strikes this summer. Plus, how they navigated and carved out spaces for themselves as Black and brown women in the biz. And advice for aspiring writers and actors. Here's Natasha and Chandra.
Hi, gorgeous. How are you?
Hi, friend. How's it going?
Hey, you know.
Yeah, I do.
When's your event? Is it tomorrow or it was happened already?
Which event?
Weren't you putting together a special picket? I feel like
we postponed it a little bit till
Gotcha.
probably till September because we had it's a bunch of logistics. It's hard to put it together.
Oh my gosh, picket life.
First,
yes,
who are you? Who are you?
I was like, Deves, can we just talk about how amazing it is to be on this conversation with you? Like, oh my gosh, Natasha, like
Me?
Yes, you. Yes, girl. We're thrilled. I'm Chandra Thomas.
You do many things, girl.
I do.
You are. Yeah, I want to know what are all the things that you actually do?
So, I claim to be a writer, actor, producer. Those are the hyphens that I very much embrace. But, that sort of looks like a lot of different things. What about you, friend? I know, obviously, writer, actor, but tell the peoples about you.
So yeah, I'm Natasha Chandel. I'm also, a weird multi-hyphenate. Started as a producer in physical production and then creative exec, and then became a full-time writer. I've been an actor for a long time, a voice actor also, and then a podcaster and stand-up comedian. Jack of all trades, master of, I don't know, none, I guess. Who knows?
Of all.
I'm always just like, gig economy. We do whatever we got to do.
This is real.
You are currently spending a lot of time, every day, right? On the pickets?
So yeah, to talk about the strike part of it, so I am a lot coordinator, which basically means that I manage the captains who are managing the site, right? So do in super producer mode is really how I look at it. And I'm at Warner Brothers. I'm there every day. So every once in a while I'll sneak away to another lot, but then I usually end up sort of slingshot back at Warner Brothers at some point during that day. But I'm there every day. And I have to say, it is so incredible to be on the front line in this kind of way. And I consider it a gift, right? Because I recognize that there's so many people who don't have the, ability to do that right now. It's just me and my plants. So, we chilling. My plants are like, yes, we feel neglected, but we're gonna make it through. So,
I think about that a lot about
yeah.
people who are going through the strike and have kids and, mortgages.
And spouses and have parents that they have to take care of. And, exactly. You have coordinated a couple of special pickets. I know you've been on the picket line as you've been juggling your things. What have been ones that have been memorable to you, or just moments in this strike that feel like, have been feeding you in this time?
I organized the South Asians in Solidarity picket. I'm East Indian. And, a big part for us is I chair the South Asian Writers Committee, but it's an unofficial WGA group. It's an unofficial group of WGA writers. So everybody in there is a South Asian WGA member. And a big part for us was that, within this community of people of color, everybody, when they think Asian, just naturally thinks East Asian. Yeah. And then when this conversation comes up for staffing and things like that, we always get overlooked as South Asians. So, we have this community that we have brought together through the South Asian Writers Committee. And so I organized the first picket, that was end of May. And it also is one of those that a lot of people talk about. It was a very large picket. Did not realize so many people would come out. Everybody and their mother, and then their mother's friends came out.
Yes.
We had a DJ. We had a singer. We had samosas. We had like a big boba truck, and then other people came and donated all kinds of Indian snacks and were giving it out. It was very touching. We had a lot of big South Asian stars come out. Danny Pudi to Mindy Kaling surprised us. We were like, wow, we invited her, but did not think she was going to come. She's busy. And she was so kind and like met with everybody, and everybody was so excited. But that idea of community is so important, and you're seeing it a lot come through in this strike time. And a lot of, I grew up in Canada. I'm Indian Canadian. So in Canada, we have a very large South Asian community, and it's very normal for us there. So everything that the community is going through here feels like 15 years behind to me, of what we fought for over there. So here, when I did that picket, so many people were like, oh my gosh, I've never been around so many South Asians before. And I just like laughed. I was like, this is like an everyday Tuesday in Toronto. Like, this is not special. But I realized that people felt it was special. And so many showrunners came out, 2 baby writers, 2, pre-WGA, and everybody was mixing and mingling, and actors. And it really warmed my heart a lot. It's cool. It's been a really nice bonding time during what is a really tough time. But there might be people who don't even know why we're striking.
Every single solitary person doesn't know every inch and every
single
syllable
thing happening in Hollywood right now. You guys don't know. Chandra, you are on the front lines. Can you sort of explain to people what the strikes are about, WGA and SAG-AFTRA?
Right. So every 3 years, there is an MBA, a big contract that is the Uber contract for members of any of the Hollywood unions. And Hollywood is a union business, which is something that I think not enough people know. So just about anything that happens on a major film set, a major television set, is under the guise of union. And so as of May 1st, the contract for WGA, Writers Guild of America, both East and West, so there are 2 sort of sides to this union, went on strike because we were not given a contract that was serviceable for the needs of our members and of the industry. There's some very crucial things that are part of this negotiation, not the least of which AI, which has gotten a lot of discussion of late. We're talking about codifying things that have been part of this business for 80 plus years in the TV writers' room, which is having a room. And so it's something that clearly is under attack by the studios. And so codifying, sort of something that has been the culture of television rooms up until this point, obviously looking for increased pay, and then also residuals and streaming. A report came out earlier today that most television, for the first time, most television is consumed not through linear. When we say linear, we're talking about broadcast. So the alphabets: ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, CW. Most TV is no longer consumed via linear television. Most of it is via streaming. And given when streaming sort of started about a decade ago, it was considered like new, we're figuring it out. And so the union was like, cool, like we'll take this like fun experiment with you. But the fun experiment has now become the thing. And the fun experiment terms of now the thing have not changed. And so it's also for the pursuit of residual streaming and residuals. And sometimes I think people outside of this business hear residuals and they're like, why should you still get paid for something you did? A couple of reasons. First of all, because they're still making money off of it, right? They are still making money off of our intellectual property, off our sweat, and off of our equity. So that's one, just in fairness. And 2, it is actually deferred payment, because the idea is you're not paid the full value of the thing up front. The agreement is we're going to give you some of it up front, but we're gonna pay the rest of it. It's like, my cousin, she likes to buy stuff on layaway. She puts the first down payment on, and she puts the rest of it, and then she gets her couch. It's that same idea, right? But we give them the couch. They got the couch, but they still got to pay that back payment. And it's the same concept. So these are sort of the things that are at stake at this point for the WGA. While we're recording this, we're now 105 days into this strike. And, obviously we hope that we can get to a fair deal sooner rather than later. We want to get back to work. Most of us, I think some people are like, oh, wait, this is cute. But the vast, 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 vast majority of us want to get back to work and making the projects that we love and the reason that so many of us have, upended our lives to be here. And there's something that I also just want to make sure to lay down. It's something that came up with these multi-hyphenates that I am so grateful that we were able to have this conversation, that so much of this business trades off of the fact that so many of us are doing this thing that's a dream, that's something we love, we're passionate about. I think, Natasha, we would both say, like, if we could do this for free, we would, right? Like, I would just show up in a room and write TV, especially what we get to do on the comedy side. If I had to pay bills, if I didn't have, like, we love this thing. And so, so often people can take, not all the time, but too often people take advantage of the fact that we're doing this thing that's a dream for ourselves and for others. And so really this has become an inflex point of really saying what we create is bringing billions with a B, billions of dollars of value, and that it's only fair that we get a portion of that value. Then from the SAG-AFTRA side, really fast, SAG-AFTRA, which is the union that represents on-screen actors, is also currently on strike and on day, I think, 33, 34, right around that point. And similarly, the leadership of SAG-AFTRA went into negotiations with the same body that WGA was in negotiations with, and we're not able to get to a deal for many reasons. And there are a lot of things that are on the table on the SAG-AFTRA contract. As Natasha already has pointed out, there are over 160,000, some have said 170,000 members of SAG-AFTRA, and there are like 11 different disciplines, 13 different disciplines that falls under. There are dancers, singers, on-camera actors, voiceover, journalists. Like, there's so many stunt performers. There's so many different sort of categories and needs that are within that, which is a little different from the 11,500 people in the Writers Guild, which is, a little bit more contained in sort of the categories. And so there are a lot of things. There has been active wage suppression of the SAG-AFTRA contracts. And so there was not only needing to address the current things like AI, which is absolutely come and done already so much damage to the career of actors, especially in voiceover, also in on-camera, but to try to make some amends for that wage suppression that's been going on for the last, some would say 10, others would say 20 years, and could not come to a fair deal. And so the SAG-AFTRA members have been on strike, and it's the first double strike in this town, in this business, in 60 plus years. And it has been, it's been a lot. Double strike, and we're double strike babes.
We are double strike babes. You explained that so well. Just to, add a little to that is for people who don't understand, because sometimes we think that people understand how hard we work. And, I have friends from back home who are like, wait, why are you guys striking? You guys make a lot of money as actors or as writers. And they don't know that, again, just for context for people to understand, when writers used to work, it was like you had a show, 22 episodes, 9 months of work, and maybe
Correct.
we're off for 3 months in a year.
Maybe.
Maybe. Now, then it slowly went to, 10 to 12 episodes and 5 months of work. Now it is getting to 6 episodes and 8 weeks of work
Mm-hmm.
in a year.
Mm-hmm.
And then when people think, well, like The Bear, I think, Alex O'Keefe talked about that. He got paid so little for 9 weeks, 8 or 9 weeks of work for The Bear, which is one of the biggest shows. Residuals, which we talk a lot about, used to pay for people's homes. That's how people had a middle class. There was a middle class writer. People I know who were from that era. I had a friend tell me that they bought a house from one residual check
Does
of a
not
network
surprise me.
show.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know about you, Chandra, but for me, I wrote on a top 10 show for Netflix with one of the biggest stars that Netflix has. They have a huge deal with him. And my episode residual is maybe a month and a half of rent. And so that's not survivable anymore. And there was and again, to add a little context to it, because again, people might just not know these little nuances, but in 07, 08, WGA struck, and it was specifically for something called new media.
Mm-hmm.
And this is when YouTube had just launched. Nobody knew what was going to come up, but we were like, hey, you know what? Writers write the most dystopian stories of the world. So we have the worst, like most overactive imagination.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're like, we know what you guys might do with this.
Mm-hmm.
So we need new media covered under the WGA contract. They said no.
Absolutely.
So we struck. We won. We got new media covered under WGA contract. For those people who don't know what counts as new media, Netflix, Disney Plus, Hulu, every streamer does not count as a regular network. It counts as new media. And
Mm-hmm.
so to this day, our residuals are not calculated the same way network residuals are calculated. They're calculated using YouTube style formulas
Mm-hmm.
based off YouTube style KPIs. And if you talk to YouTube stars, you need millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of views to get $100.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't even know what we get because streamers don't reveal their
Lack
data.
of data transparency.
So it's just so people understand that we're not complaining of like, oh, here's some Hollywood elite and they just want more money because these guys are rich. People we know are like dog sitting right now, and they're
Correct.
nannying and they're doing anything to survive because this is not anymore a viable career, a
And
sustainable
have been
career.
doing that even when they were in a room, staffed in a
Even
room,
while
and
they were in a
having
room.
to,
Yep.
right? Having
Yep.
to have 3 other jobs to survive. And also to put further context on this, because sometimes people bandy numbers of like, oh, you wrote on there's a writer who was very transparent about their pay. They wrote on 2 seasons of Lord of the Rings, which had $1 billion budget for 2 seasons, because right, they bought the 2 seasons up front, and for the 2 seasons total, they made $80,000 total. And so most people will hear that and be like, $80,000, that's a lot of money. To qualify as low income in Los Angeles, you have to make less than $75,000. That
And
qualifies somebody as low income in Los Angeles. So that means split that in 2. That person made $40,000 a year
that's what I was
before tax, before having to pay, because you have all these people that you have to pay, who are employees essentially, who make commission off of your income. You have to pay all those folks. We're talking about lawyers, agents, managers,
And
might
remember,
be
just again,
publicists.
math for people: agent 10%, manager 10%, lawyer 5%, 25% of your income, boom, gone. A second
Gone. And
tax.
that's on pre-tax, right? So somebody could be like, well, after you take your tax out, then it's like, no, that's based on pre-tax income. And you still got to pay, Unky Sam his 30, 33, 35, whatever percent. I know folks who are at that like 49% like tax bracket, like still have to pay all this and live and work. And the other thing that I also feel like sometimes gets lost, it's not to say if you work on a broadcast show, which can have a more steady pay structure and pay formula, the kind of work that one does on a broadcast show is not different from the kind of work somebody does on a streaming or a cable show. You're still making shows, you still have to manage a budget, you still have to do rewrites on the fly, you still have to be on set, you still have, it's the same thing you're doing. It's just how the studios have been able to find a way to say, well, we distribute it differently, so that's why we have to pay you differently. But it requires the same amount of work, sometimes even more on some of those streamers, because the budgets are set up in a way where people have to now fill in the gaps because there are not enough people covering some of the other responsibilities. So, again, I just cannot emphasize enough, this is about fairness.
I gotta say, and I'm curious what you think, I think everything has a boundary. And I have found that as the strike has gone on, for me to manage my own mental health, I have had to distance from the everyday chatter of the strike, which is hard for you because you're in it every day over there. But I hope that like you get some break from just like trying to manage things and not get into those day-to-day conversations. But those day-to-day conversations are constantly heavy. And I'm curious how your mental health has like evolved through the strike. Because for me, it was rough in the first couple months and now I'm good. But the first month and a half, 2 months was pretty roller coastery for me.
Yeah, no, I hear that and I respect that and I take that on board. And I think, part of my sort of way to maintain mental health involves me getting involved, right? And I feel like part of the reason that I have been operating at this level, which is a level that's I admittedly is very high, is because that helps me stay grounded, right? In a way, it's like, cool, I'm taking action versus like wallowing or trying to like or rumors or what have you. I'm just, I'm a stubborn Black woman from New York. I'm a first gen, like from my parents are from the West Indies. Like I'm like the perfect combination of the most stubborn and Scorpio, like every possible stubborn thing you could think of, I am her. And so I'm like, I'm in it to win it, right? I'm like, we're good. So what are those things then to just make sure that I'm like using my energy in the most judicious way is what I found myself having to sort of balance. But I hear you about the part of getting involved in the nitty gritty. It's conjecture, right? Everything is conjecture. We don't exactly know what the studios are thinking or doing or what have you. And I know there's sort of the fun union game of like, well, this is why they've done blah blah blah, and I know that because in 1975 they did blah blah blah. Like, okay, sure, but we don't really know, right? So it's all us just spinning yarn at the end of the day. And things will unfold as they are currently unfolding, and hopefully will unfold very heavy-handedly on our side.
Oh, I totally agree. I so appreciate that you have such a different approach because I think it's important for people who are listening, I'm sure, to take away that there are multiple ways of managing your mental health.
I get that so much. That reflects who and how we are.
What is your story?
I was gonna say, what is your story though?
I'm from all over. So I was born in Dubai. I lived in Mumbai. I was raised in Toronto, Canada since I was 7. And then I moved to New York and now LA. But yeah, my journey to sort of being a writer was also kind of weird and windy. Being Indian, have never had connection to this industry. Nobody, my parents didn't know anything about it. So really it was a lot of like trial and error. I started theater and improvs when I was 7. I thought that's what I was going to do. I wanted to go to Juilliard and be an actor in New York City. And when it finally came time to applying for college, my parents were like, "Oh, we thought that was a joke. Sit back down. Not actually doing that." And I was like, what the heck? Like, I've been planning this like my whole life. And so then I was like, all right, well, then I'll just learn everything behind the scenes. And like an overachieving Indian, I got my first job in television production when I was 16. So I was the youngest floor director of 4 live shows in a network called Rogers Television.
Oh my gosh.
No, I'm telling you. And I was bossing around like the Maple Leafs and the Mayors and not thinking anything of it because you have this like reckless self-confidence when you're, 16. And I promise I won't go year by year, but these couple years set off a little trajectory. But when I was 17, they asked me to then become a news reporter. And I was like, oh, I look like I'm 12. So like, what are you guys thinking? But I always had this very like improv yes and mentality that I still have to this day, that like my managers now are like, you can say no, because I say yes to everything. And so, when they were like, be a news reporter, I was like, all right. They just kept saying like, trust us. I was like, okay. And so I did. And this news story aired that I wrote, and another producer called them and said, we want her to write a historical documentary on a city's 150th anniversary.
Oh my God.
I was 17. And I was like, huh? I'm 17 is what I said. And they were like, just trust us. We think you're a strong writer. I was like, okay, yes. And so I worked for a year with a historian, didn't realize that along the way I was producing. And this documentary came out and I got my first writing and producing credit. And it ended up winning like a Telly and a Galaxy Award.
Nice.
For the network. And that kind of kickstarted the career. But in Canada, we didn't have as much of a writing path. So I fell into producing. Then I interned in VH1 in New York City, fell in love and was like, I'm going to move to New York and work at MTV. And I did. And so I became a producer writer at MTV News for 4 years. And I got that job because in between gigs, I was there was this thing called YouTube that was coming out, and nobody knew about it. And so I created, wrote, directed, and starred in the very first scripted Indian comedy web series on the internet.
Legend status, I tell you.
Crazy
Legendary.
looking back, because it was called Mumbai Chopra, and it was created from an improv character. And there's a lot of things we did in that show that shows are doing now, and really broke a lot of mold. And I'm very proud of it. And that show actually caught the attention of the head of talent at Viacom. So that's where I got a first look deal at Viacom. I got my job as a producer writer. I was there for 4 years. And then I was like, I want to be in scripted television and move to LA. So when I finally did that, I was like, oh, I'm in LA. I'm going to work in scripted. And then they dangled money in front of my face. So I was like, I never had anybody pay my bills. I got to take the job. And so I just became a night supervising producer on a show called Utopia for Fox. And then I went to Maker Studios and Disney. So I was there for 2.5 years as a supervising producer and then a traditional creative executive in a current series. So after doing that soul-sucking job, Disney acquired our company and they laid everybody off. Wow. And I finally got to do what I wanted to do, which is write. And I do tell people this as my part of the story, which is by the time that happened for me, I was much farther along in my other part of my career as a producer. So I had a lifestyle, I had a, quality of life. And I'm very much about claiming stuff to the universe. And I literally told everybody and their mother, I was like, I really appreciate assistants. I don't have time right now to be an assistant in my life. So I got to write something that's going to get me staffed directly.
Mm-hmm.
And like, luckily the people I had talked to who were in the business were all like, yeah, you can do that. You can. I was like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually wrote a sample that would stand out of a pile.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I got staffed on Mr. Iglesias on Netflix,
Mm-hmm.
and from there I wrote on a Peacock animated show called Press Start. And once I made that writing transition, I kind of put everything else aside.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and have been writing full time. And like I said, I do voiceover, stand up, and I host a podcast also called Kinda Dating. So between all of that, and then I take a producing gig if in between jobs there's something. Like last
Mm-hmm.
summer, I worked on an MTV show and, Are You the One Global? And so do things like that. But yeah, that's kind of a long winded fucking story.
I loved every wind, every breath, every breeze of it. Thank you for sharing that. That was so fun.
Yeah. What about you?
Um, it's so funny how so many similarities. I mean, we've known each other for a while, so it's not surprising, right? that there would be these overlaps, but it was so fascinating to hear that. So born and raised in New York, and as I mentioned, a first gen, and found myself in spaces where I didn't quite fit in with anybody, right? Because I wasn't sort of like, somebody who was like a multi-generational Black person in this country, and I'm not white, so like was always sort of like trying to find my place. And so I landed in theater, and theater sort of like made sense. I could like transform into characters as an actor. I could bring that older sibling bossy energy as a producer, like not even really realizing I was a producer at like 10, but that's what I was doing, right? And so really like found theater to be such a home for me. And then when it came for time for college, same with my parents. They were like, that's cute that she was doing a little theater thing, but time to do something real now. And I was like, cool, well, I'm just gonna get one of my degrees in theater and go to law school. Like that was my sort of like excuse to them. And I used to hang out on Broadway, like literally just hang out on Broadway, just like chilling on the streets, buying like sandwiches and sitting out in the street. And so I went to go see a show, and really, it was a show that I had seen before, but somehow in my first Thanksgiving break from college, I was like, no, this is my path. I'm supposed to create theater. I'm supposed to be part of the theater experience. And so, had to come home and have that difficult conversation with my parents, and they were like, this is not why we came here. This is not why. This is, all of that. Fast forward in that part of the story, they are now the absolute co-chairs of my fan club. Every time I'm like, this is so hard. And they're like, what are you going to do? Where are you going? What you going? And like, they just course correct me, and they are unequivocally my biggest fan. I'm so grateful to them and for them. But at that point, right, I was still trying to find my way. So I ended up coming out of college with 2 degrees, one in theater and one in sociology. And as I was graduating, I realized I wanted to, I love school. School makes sense to me. I couldn't wrap my brain around school. The idea of like, I have to go get a job and like pay for rent, I didn't quite understand yet. So I was like, let me just defer that further by going to school some more. So I went to graduate school and got my MFA in acting at Columbia University back in New York. And that was rough for the right reasons and rough for the wrong reasons. But I just like grew as a person, and really part of why I decided to go to Columbia versus other opportunities I had is because while you had a focus, my concentration was acting, you still had to expand your skills in all these other ways. So as a writer, as a director, as a producer, as a dramaturg, like getting to really grow creatively, even though there was sort of like a single path that I was primarily on. And so when it was time to get out of there, I was like, I have no more deferrals that I could do. We got to do real life now. And within a month of graduating, I booked, as an actor, booked a role in one of the largest theaters in the country, outside of New York, and was like, great, this is the path. And I had also, during graduate school, I had started a nonprofit organization with a graduate school colleague, called Vibe Theater Experience. We work with teen girls to create their own original performances. And so that was in its nascent stage. And I was, coming and doing this show. Got, like, this is the peak. I walked out of grad school into a job, like, this is it. So I got my first paycheck and I was like, whoo, girl can't eat and pay rent. She gonna have to make choices here. And I'm like, this is not the move. So that really made me realize I was gonna have to do all of the things, whether I like signed up for it or not. So it was had sort of like these sort of two full-time careers of like being this nonprofit administrator and also being like, an actor, writer, producer, really at that point. And so was overworked as the overambitious, first generation gal that we, how we do. I think I ended up living in like 30 different states at the end of the day, like doing shows, working on projects, shooting films, researching for something that I was creating, like just have lived all over the place. I specifically remember the moment I was in Pittsburgh working on a show. I was on the elliptical, like, because a girl's got to keep fit. I'm on the elliptical and I like literally had the like movement in my spirit of like, you have to move to LA. Then it got to a point though where it was like cacophonic of how many people and things and circumstances were like, you need to go to LA. After a bitter breakup, because a girl's gotta change things up when a breakup happens. I was like, you know what? I think I'm just gonna have to do it. And at that point, I had never written an episode of TV, plays, features, sketches, musicals, like everything else, but had never written a pilot. And I knew TV writing, right, was really at the core of why I needed to move to Los Angeles. And so I was like, I'm not going to be that person who shows up being like, I'm going to be a TV writer. Like, I had never written an episode of TV. So in 2 weeks, I wrote 2 pilots.
Wow.
And I know. So had my two scripts in hand, like showed up in LA and realized I needed to put myself in writer spaces because I was so like, though I had been writing for a long time, like really was so actor forward and like knew that I could walk into any space as an actor, but like needed to sort of reposition myself and expand my community on the writer front. And so just put myself in every writer circumstance that you can imagine. It didn't matter what the community was. If they said writer was going to be there, I was there. So like I was showing up at like being the only, whatever you could imagine, I was the only one. And I would show up in every, like, I was like, I heard TV writers or writers are going to be here. And people always embraced me, which was always so amazing. And I'm still so grateful for it. And so I just showed up. I was doing like 6 days a week, just showing up every place that I could in a writer space. And at that time I was still bi-coastal between New York, blah, 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 blah. And then realized I needed to make the switch and really be mainly based in LA. And I am so like, when people ask me often of like, what do you feel like was the thing that like helped get you, move the writer journey forward? And I think about that period as the time. That's when I found out the whispers of like, this is how I did it. And, one of the things that's so incredible and so frustrating about this work is if you want to be a doctor, you got to go to this school, you got to take these exams, you got to go through this internship, there's such a set path. And to do what we do, you can literally roll out of bed and do it, or you could be somebody who's like had a 30-year career and be, it's such a, there's so many ways to bite this apple. And so I got to hear all of those stories and like try my different versions of those. And I had what I call my Spike Lee year of by any means necessary, and just put myself in every circumstance, every context that I could, to just, try to make this thing happen. And got a lot of no's, but as as an actor, knows what we get. So it like not dissuaded by no's. But got a yes, a few yeses. The one yes in particular was getting into the CBS Writers Program. And that positioned me through very, again, non-traditional circumstances. That positioned me to get in front of the showrunners for Mom, which was the first show that I staffed on. And so since then, also staffed on an adult animated series comedy for Amazon. And most recently was staffed on Tacoma FD, a single cam comedy. And in fact, which was a lovely full circle moment on the season premiere. Not only am I a writer of the whole season, but I was a guest star on the season premiere of the current season. So yeah.
Oh my gosh, what an amazing journey. I mean, I'm curious what the experience has been for you being a actor writer. Was there any weirdness or pushback or thing in the room? Because I have gotten it in the past and sometimes still even now, which is weird because I just don't think they do that with men.
Come on, tell that whole truth.
Because let's you talk about Ted Lasso and you go, Brett Goldstein was a writer in the room who had the audacity to pitch himself for one of the series' regular characters, gets it, and it's whatever. And I know when I was making the transition, I was told to keep all of my other experiences. I was actually told to not talk about the fact that I was a producer, that I was a creative exec, that I was an actor. And right before I got staffed on Mr. Iglesias, like literally a month and a half before, do you know the show Never Have I Ever?
Yeah, of course.
So I was runner up for one of the main characters, the cousin role.
Okay.
And so that was like a huge thing.
Yeah,
and
of course.
Me and my friend who got it, and so people at that time had heard, but I didn't mention anything. And it was this weird thing that was like people were watching and you could sense like, oh, she's an actor, so is she gonna try to put herself in something? I'm like, dude, I'm not like a monster. I don't know what you guys think, but funny enough, even on Iglesias, we had a writer who was an actor on the show and it wasn't a big deal. But I don't know. I always felt like I've had to really, really show people and go out of my way to make sure they don't think I'm ever going to use the opportunity to get myself on the show.
Completely agree. I think you're so spot on. So, because I gratefully have a resume as an actor, right? I can't hide it. Like, you know what I mean? If you Google, if you look at my IMDb, right, it's very obvious that I have this background. So I don't lie and say, oh, that's a different show. You know what I mean? Like, it's there, but I don't move with it forward for the very reasons that you're pointing out, that people I had this experience. I was meeting with a showrunner in a group context, very low stakes. Nobody was trying to get a job. It was just like a conversation with a small group of people. I will not say the showrunner's name, but this person was rather mean, to be very honest. They are known to be mean also, so let's also like contextualize that that's their thing. And the part of what their response was, when just us casually talking, was, I don't know if you're trying to get a job from me as an actor or as a writer, because we were just talking about like our experience, in the world. And I mentioned that, I have a background as an actor. And that was such a jarring, that was just like, it was before I got I staffed on my first show. And I was like, is this how everybody's going to respond? Come to find out, folks are way more understanding of this in the comedy space than they are in the drama space. And this particular showrunner is a drama writer. I agree. Not to say that it's 100%. Because there is more of a vocabulary for it among
cooler if you're a stand-up. Not so much.
especially if you're a stand-up. That's
Because I'm a
very true.
stand-up now, they love that. But if I said actor, for some reason, they're like, "Oh, you're trying to get on the show? Stand up." They're like, "Oh, we wanna." I'm like, this
right.
Is silly.
And stand up, I would rather lay myself on a railroad track and be run over back and forth by a train 100 times than do stand up. But that's the whole other thing. That's something I need to work out with my therapist. But that was such a like, ooh. So I have made it a point of like not going forward. You know, I don't lean forward with the fact that I'm an actor. But in the room, when we're reading the script, they're always like, "Oh, Chandra, can you read it first?" Because it's such a funny sort of dichotomy with regards to like the show that I most recently stepped on, where I was a writer. I never offered in my meeting, my showrunners were like, "Hey, we know you're an actor also. Do you still do it?" And like, so they were, because they're also the lead actors, right? So they get the vibe, right? They get what the thing looks like. And I was like, yes, but it won't be a problem. Like also like trying to make it clear, like when I'm in a room, I'm a writer first above all the other things. So when they called to offer me the role, I was like, I had not even thought about, being in this context. It had never crossed my mind because, that's not how I was leading. But I think it also is a testament to if you do the thing you do well, people will see that. People will recognize it. They didn't ask me to come back to set, right? Because they just were doing me. Like, they were like, she did what she was supposed to do in the room. We know that she's going to show up and do what she needs to do on set, So I will say that.
Yeah, no, and I love that. And I think we, especially as women and women of color, have to not shrink ourselves. Like I did, and I admittedly used to very much shrink myself about all of this. I would not talk about it. But now I'm like, there's no way I can avoid this. I'm like, same thing. Google me. You try to follow me on Instagram. It's going to be a thing. So I'm like, I'm not even gonna, and now I lean into it. And like you said, taking those life experiences and those other things that you have and making them strengths in the room. For anyone listening, take whatever those life experiences are and use them as your strength. And it doesn't have to be like, oh, you were a carpenter, so what can you bring in the room that you can't cut wood? It's like, no, but maybe you're really good at fine tune, detail oriented. That's what it is, right? Like you're really measured about everything. So like take those transferable skills and move them over. So like whatever we have going on in our life to not shrink from it. But like you said, I do think you have to be mindful to make sure that the story you're telling somebody about yourself when you're meeting them is more focused on what you want, because people just don't have the capacity all the time to be creative and to think that you have all these other things that you can bring to the table. So even when you're hearing our stories, it's like we're honing in on the thing that we're about.
Agree. It's not even just the creativity. I just don't. It's so interesting being on the line now. Now that we're in this double strike, folks are like, "Oh, you're an actor also," like because right, people have gotten to know me in this town as a writer first, and so it's so interesting how, though we all know people who are multi-hyphenates, that it just takes a minute for people to sort of like make this connect these synapses. And so it's even beyond the creativity of it, like having to lay the path, like make it very straightforward so people can connect those dots, because it's not something that necessarily happens organically. And that is the goal. That is the goal, is to be doing all the things that we do so fabulously and to do them with joy. So we have been talking about once you're in the room, but I guess we gotta kind of actually talk about getting into the room. So getting into this business, right? What does it look like to even make it, carve out a space? I know people like to use the term break in. I like completely revolt against that term. So I'm going to offer, how do we carve in, right? Because break to me says the thing no longer, it's shattered, it no longer exists. But as you can speak to, once you get in a little in, you have to keep working to get further in. The thing is not shattered, right? So can you talk a little bit, tell us what would be advice, things you have tried, things that you've seen work for people trying to start that carving into the business?
Yeah, and I think you and I have the same perspective as children of immigrants. I am an immigrant to this country. I came by
Mm-hmm.
myself. I always tell people, like, and this is a true story. I came with 2 bags of clothes. I on a $50 megabus. I had
Oh
no
my
job.
gosh.
I had no visa. I had no place to stay. I called up my friend and was like, "Hey, can I crash on your couch for 2 weeks?" And it turned into a month and a half. And then I figured my life out. And same in
Mm,
Canada, in the sense that, you know, a child of Indian immigrants who, like, they're not in this business. They don't know anything about anything. I'm just a girl with a dream who's like, I want to do this. And it honestly took me a lot longer to figure out, and I've talked about this openly, about writing.
mm,
I had no guidance and direction on how to be a writer. I didn't know that the show was created by a writer. I always thought a producer did it. Because in Canada, they're always
yeah,
pushing you into producing. And so
right.
you're just like, oh, yeah, I guess. And so on a producer end, it's really just like, if you want to be an actual producer in physical production or something, it's like starting as a PA. I've literally been a gaffer on music video sets. So part of my other thing to what you were saying earlier is also be good to support staff and also be good to crew.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, like, it's so important to me. I've honestly, every time I'm on set, like, the people I bond with more are crew, just
Mm-hmm.
because that's who I grew up with and that's where I've kind of find my people. And trust me, they're gonna make you look good too. So keep them happy.
That is
Um,
real.
right? But as a writer, um, I think the big thing, and now especially, and I'm sure you could attest to this, is um, there are many ways to break in. Uh, it does start as a writer with your script. No matter what we say, this is not one of those where, hey, you look at the part, we could mold it. It's not one of those. It really is like when you compare the unions and you go 160,000 SAG actors, 11,500 WGA members. It's hard to get in. And that's why we're so grateful when we do. We're like, oh my God, because you know how hard it is. And you and I are part of Amy Aniobi, who's was an exec producer on Insecure. She has been an old friend of mine. And when I wanted to transition into writing from producing, I was like, what do I do? And she literally was like, write, write, write. And I know it seems so silly. You're like, yeah, okay, right, right. But I didn't realize that other people are not doing that.
Correct.
So even to this day, I get hit up all the time by actor friends who are like, I want to be in a room. So what do I do? Or stand-ups who are like, I want to get in, but they don't write. They're like, so you want to work together? I'm like, boo boo, I don't have time to take on anybody else's stuff. I'm doing 5 things of my own. So, like, I don't have time. I'm happy to read something if you do the work and you write. So the first thing is like writing. So, and look, again, immigrant, I didn't have a lot of money. I didn't have financial support. I came here with literally just what I had on my back and tiny savings from when I worked since I was 15 at like Pizza Hut and Walmart and, a men's suit store and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have a lot, and I couldn't afford to go back to school. That wasn't an option for me to go back and study screenwriting and do all of that. So I read books. So, like, read screenplay books, follow it like a formula, and then you can start adding your own twist onto it and whatever, but at least it will teach you structure. So to
Mm-hmm.
this day, if anybody reads any of my stuff, they're like, oh, her structure is tight. I'm like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
'cause I just didn't deviate from it. The structure is structure is structure is structure is structure. period. So again, the greats at one point, they might tweak around the structure, but for now, to get into the room, focus on those things. And then also along the way, and something that worked for me was I created my own stuff, which I was doing this way before anybody was making their own things. When I made a web series, I could not get anybody to work with me. It was like, it actually is the reason I stopped. I did it for 4 years.
Yeah.
I had all these hats. I was directing it, writing it, producing it, not because I wanted to, or I was some narcissist. There was nobody.
Yep.
I would be like, I have a web series. People are like, what's a web series? I'm like, it's on YouTube. People are like, what's YouTube? I'm like, there's a URL. And they're like, what's a URL? I'm like, fuck off. You know, like that was that constant process all the time. So, but it was hard work. I caught pneumonia. I had mental breakdowns left, right, and center trying to have a full-time job where I was working at MTV from 2 p.m. till 2 a.m. I did the night shift in news for 4 years. I woke up at 7:30 in the morning, would write my show, go to the gym, eat a little lunch, go to work, and then film on weekends. And I did that for 4 years. But the series came out, and after the first season, I got a first look deal. And then, you know, I've always had this calling card that put me it got me a lot of attention that I wasn't even trying to. I just literally was like, I want to tell this story, and nobody's gonna, I don't know, I'm not staffed yet. So like, I guess I'll just do this on my own. So I think having grit is really important in this business, and all like perseverance, and also being crafty, you know. You gotta create opportunities for yourself. But I will say, immigrants, because we like know that none of this was given to us. I just became a citizen last year, and I'm always like, yeah, I did it without having a sham marriage. Like I feel very, you know, self-made in that sense. Is we have to be high achieving to a level that is not normal. And I have realized I have a hard time sometimes working with people who are not at that level, because I need things fast. I need you to be thinking about stuff 10 steps ahead. But all of that, like, don't just make something to make something. Make something amazing. Just put your heart and soul into it and make it really good. If you want to write that script that's going to get you staffed, you know what I did? I was like, I don't have time to be an assistant right now, so I'm going to write a kick-ass script that is going to stand out of a pile. So I actually wrote something very edgy. I wrote something called Coconut. I knew you were either going to love it or you were going to hate it, but it's going to stand out of a pile because it was very specific. And it did. Got me a development deal. It got me all these things, but it also, like, I also had people who said like, oh, I know this is supposed to make me uncomfortable, but it makes me uncomfortable. But it also got me staffed, because when I got to the right showrunner, he was into all of that stuff. And so you got to be a little strategic. Sometimes I do the reverse engineering way. I go like, where do you want to go? And then what steps do you need to get there, and like create that to-do list. It's a very producer thing, you know, like function on to-do lists. So to do that. And then my last thing would just be like, I know this sounds silly, but I'm going to tell you it works, is vision boarding. So I thought it was so dumb before. And I started in 2019. And I can show you my vision board, but I make one every year now. But I have like my big one. And my big one had a bunch of things on it. But it also had a logo of Netflix Originals. And it had Mindy Kaling. And it had, you know, this love section that I thought was silly. I was like, oh, this is, you know, I have a dating podcast. I'm never finding love. So I just kind of did that as like a joke. I was like, whatever, let's just do this. In 2019, I tested for Never Have I Ever and ended up in a room with Mindy Kaling, where Mindy Kaling came over. I didn't even know she was going to be there. And at the test, she walks over to me. Is like, hi, oh my God, thank you so much for being here. I was like, what the hell is happening? And then I got staffed on a Netflix original, Mr. Iglesias, that came out of nowhere. And then I ended up with my boyfriend in 2020, who looks exactly like what I have in the vision board. It's almost a joke. And even after that, like all of those things have, I've been a voice actor, and I had and this was in 21. In the start of 21, I said, I want to start doing video games. I want to start voicing video games. And I was like, I don't know anything about video games, but I was like, what's the biggest video game in the world? Call of Duty. So I put Call of Duty in my vision board, and didn't look at it or anything, and kept it moving. And then when you do these voiceover auditions, you don't know what you're auditioning for because they come in code names. So especially for video games. So I booked one, didn't know. And I was like, all right. So I like go in the studio, like doot. And they're like, hi, welcome to Call of Duty. I was like, what?
I love it.
Like, so there is something to say with like, do your hard work, put it out to the universe, claim your stuff, and then do all the actionable steps that will get you there. That was my really, again, long-winded answer of like how to break in. And I don't know if that was like the right answer. What would you say?
I love all the gusts. I was there for all of them. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I love that. Vision boards, I love hearing people say that they have such good experience with the vision boards because they have never been successful for me. So I'm like, it's like, I feel like I need to put a vision board on my vision board. Like that will be a thing for me. Again, like with this idea of like that first carve into the business, I cannot underline enough, especially if somebody is wanting to be a writer, and I'll sort of parse out the different things, at least that I consider my main hyphens. To be a writer, especially in television, but even on the feature side, I cannot underline enough what you said about you need to have a script. Like I said in my sort of narrative of like, I didn't want to be the one who showed up who did not have a script. And that's why for 2 weeks I like ate, ramen noodles and like didn't even stop to make them cook all the way. Cause I was just like nonstop writing to have these 2 pilots ready, to go before, I hit Los Angeles. So right, I cannot underscore that enough. People are like, well, I just need to network with the right people. Networking is another term that like people use in this business that like I throw out the door, because what does that mean? Build community. And so I cannot underscore this enough of the need for having strong scripts. There's a saying that people have in this business of rights into the career you want. And I love that. Like this idea that like, cool, if you are wanting to write for or sell a dramedy or an hour-long dramedy, or you want to do the sketch variety show, whatever it is, like to write that thing, write toward that. You hear stories so often of people who like have carved out a career in sitcoms and like, really, I want to be an hour-long drama writer, and then they write that hour-long drama script that like gets them then on the radar to move and transition in that direction. So I cannot underscore that enough. I completely agree with you. I was like, I've managed millions of dollars in budgets. I have been a manager of 50, 60, 80 people. I have run sets. Like for me, being an assistant wasn't going to be the right transition point. And so I needed to have a script that was going to sort of do some things. And I don't think I think everything I write is edgy, but it's not. I don't think it's edgy at the same time. I know, a dichotomy. And so the script I call my workhorse script really was so connected to my own journey as sort of a gig economy actor. And the first 3 pages is what has gotten me all of, like, yes, people read the whole thing, but the first 3 pages is really what has moved the needle so much for me, and has done most of the heavy lifting in that workhorse of a script. And so that's another thing that I would just offer of like really looking I had people say, oh, they're not going to read past the first 5 pages if it's a half-hour script, first 10 pages if it's an hour long. They might read beyond that, but make them read beyond that, right? Like, even if they are going to give you the courtesy, like, really make the most of that. And that speaks to that strategic piece, right? That, like, always telling the story you want to tell. Sometimes people hear that and they think, oh, I should just tell a story that I think people are going to respond to. No, it's telling a story that feels, especially if it's something to make that first carve in, something that feels like people can read it and be like, oh, I get a sense of who Natasha is, I get a sense of who so and so is. But has something fresh, something new, something that may have a twist on the familiar, what have you, that's really going to make the script sort of rise above the other scripts, because they're going to read a lot of scripts. No matter what it is, they're going to read a lot of scripts. So I just want to underline that from the writer perspective. As an actor, if somebody is interested in doing this work, people often want to be like, well, so-and-so never took a class. Okay, you should take a class. You should be studying.
Every major actor takes classes.
Take a class. Be specific about the kinds of classes you want to take. Sometimes we just gonna tell the whole truth. In LA, some of these classes get a little cult-ish.
Weird.
We don't need to do that.
Side note, I feel like New York classes are way better. I just find
infinite.
Like I've struggled with that. You and I can talk separately about that.
Yes, infinitely better. Agree, because it's about the work versus like LA. There can be this other energy that's happening. So you have to carve. You have to parse out and bloom where you are. I just hosted and produced a panel discussion with Multi-Hyphenates, had phenomenal guests on there. It was absolutely incredible. And Ashley Nicole Black, who was one of the panelists, spoke to bloom where you are. So if you are in Philadelphia, New Orleans, Chicago, where have you, you can be doing this stuff right there, right? So finding the best class you can be taking, not only for the craft part of it, but also it's that whisper campaign that I was talking about when I was like making that like transition to sort of flipping writer in the front of my hyphens versus actor in the front. And so you start to hear like who's doing the plays, who's shooting an indie film, who has a cousin who wants to write a short that we can all get on, right? You start building community again by being in this sort of shared space and having like a common language because you're all taking the same classes, and having an opportunity to build out your work, your resume, your reel, reel being the sort of clips that are pieced together, and absolutely doing the work. Like, we live in an era where you can just put your work on display. You can be putting that 30-second, 15-second, 5-second, do la 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 on Instagram, on TikTok. Like, you can be creating opportunities for people to want to engage with you. So that was what I will say for the actor producer. So much of what I learned as a producer was sort of kidnapping mentors, like me putting myself in situations where like the first like real producing jobs that I had was really, I came in as a casting producer. In other words, I knew a lot of actors, I brought that value, and then I put myself in circumstances where I was around other producers so I could learn what the skill sets were and what I needed to learn. And so bringing whatever the value is to a production and being that sort of mentee, whether they knew they were my mentor or not, I thought they were, right, inadvertently became my mentors. And then kicking the tires on it. Like, again, we live in such an era where you can produce something that's 10 seconds and people think, oh, 10 seconds is nothing. It takes so much to produce. Like, I mean, you are on these socials, like, there is so much, it takes so much time, it takes so much energy, it takes so much resource, but to kick the tires on it, to do the thing, and you're going to learn, you're going to make mistakes. You just hope that the mistakes are not so big that they squelch the great things that you have done or will do in the future.
I really am always humbled by, like, I hear your story and how hard you work, and you can feel your determination. And That's amazing. Like, and that's what you need, guys. You need Chandra Thomas determination, and like, you got to write a script it doesn't have to be as fast as her, but at least like you got to write a kick-ass thing if you want to be a writer, and like go in with that like determination, because this business is hard otherwise.
It is. And, so often I think people get like dissuaded because like the first thing didn't hit. What's amazing is you can keep biting at the apple. It's not going to be every script that's going to be the killer. I've written scripts since that I'm like, ain't nobody ever going to see this, including my mama. But I got this script out of me. And there are others that like, are doing work for me and I've sold, have been, gotten through development, everything it's still a journey. That's why I, again, why I so resist the break. And I was like, you're still growing, you're still learning, things are going to have to change and grow and evolve. But yes, you were going to say something even better and wiser. And
No, I was just going to say, like, I mean, I think both of our examples are great in that it's quality versus quantity. And you can't be limited by your age, and I know some people are, and I know that there are going to be people who will judge you on A, B, C, D, E. But can I be honest? Like, they can suck my non-existent,
We do know.
Yeah. So those people aren't right for you. And there are a lot of other people who aren't judging and wouldn't judge. And so that should not stop you. The best, and the reason, like, I got into stand-up much later in my career. And the reason I have moved faster in stand-up, because everybody's like, how is she showcasing here? And how come she's doing this and opening for these people and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, bitch, because I know myself now. I have a lot more stories to tell, and I know myself now. So like, that is the beauty of age. So use that to your advantage. You have amazing stories to tell. Lean into something so specific that nobody else could say, and like, just kill it,
To the point about older writers, whatever we're going to call older writers, most of the writers that I know, this writing is a second, third, fourth, fifth career for them. Somebody does not have a fifth career and they're 22. That's just not how that works, right? So first of all, there is already a well-trod space for writers who are breaking in, carving in at this later stage, right? That's the first thing I'll say. Second, the page speaks before anything else. So if it's a well executed script, people are going to meet with you, right? And then it's, what do you do with that? So obviously we recognize that ageism is a real thing. I'm not downplaying it. It's why many of us don't say our ages, because we know people, once you start putting numbers on it, people are like, wait a second, wait, huh? What? Trying to do algorithms and hoops and jumps. So we recognize it's a thing. And being a writer, most especially, you can navigate around some of those valleys, we'll call them, by making the page speak and speak well. And then, as something that we've repeated multiple times, of you're bringing in a specific experience, somebody who is coming to this who used to be a doctor, who used to be a nurse, even who used to be a carpenter, to use your example from earlier. You're going to bring certain skill sets. You're going to bring certain stories. I can't bring no carpenter stories. I'm like, best I can offer you is Jesus was a carpenter. Like, that's the best I got for you.
I can't even hang painting, so.
Right? I'm like, I know how to spell paint. It got an I. So being able to like capitalize on those experiences that come with living a life, having lived for some amount of time, I can be an asset. It's just always, how do you make sure that you keep your voice fresh, no matter what your age is?
All right, lady. I feel like we gave him a lot.
Maybe and too much.
No, maybe. But we're gonna do something called martini shot. All right, we gonna get drunk, even though we're not gonna get drunk. It's a 5-minute segment of rapid fire questions. related to the biz. Are you ready, Chandra Thomas, for your martini shot?
I am not ready, but I know I'm with you, so I'm going to be ready because it's us together.
It'll be great. It'll be great. We'll make it up as we go along.
We will.
Chandra, what is your favorite book turned movie or show?
I'm the worst about this because I always want something to be original. So I'm the worst person to ask this question. But if I had to stretch, I would say, I wouldn't say favorite, but has been instrumental on me is Roots. It was, right. I look back on that show, obviously predates me, but I look back on that series of how it changed the conversation. And it's such a, to me, vivid example of like how we can show ourselves in ways that people could understand for the first time. You know, when it aired originally, it was like the largest, it had the largest viewership numbers like for decades. Like, you know, it was such a huge show. And Alex Haley is an absolute legend. So yeah, I don't know if it's my, again, I want to see original stuff, but I appreciate the legacy of that particular show. What about you?
I'm gonna nerd out a little. This is probably not the like the I don't know, the bougie answer at all. This is the nerd answer. Anything Marvel. I'm a comic book nerd. And
Yay.
I love Marvel movies. Um, there are some misses for sure. We can get into that debate another time. But
Mm-hmm.
you know, Iron Man and Spider-Man were my probably favorite adaptations. Love it. Like I said, just watched Avengers marathon. Um, so yeah, comic book is a type of book that I feel
I hear a book in the name.
yeah, that's what I feel. Um, if you could bring one show back to air, which would it be?
A Different World.
Hmm.
Love that show. Was so instrumental to me in terms of my voice and the kinds of stories and characters that I wanted to see. Would love. I that said, I also am a Golden Girls Golden Head and also a living single Golden Head, but bringing a show back, A Different World. Talk to me.
That would be
Tell
good.
me. Tell me what is it? What you got, Tash?
You're so classy. I'm so not. Uh, you know, a show I loved growing up, which I don't know how you could bring it back. It would probably be too edgy for this day. Even is Married with Children. I
Oh.
loved Married with Children. I grew up watching a lot of like edgy comedy, which is
Mm-hmm.
probably why my brain thinks the way it does. But you know, All in the Family,
Mm.
Married with Children. I loved those kinds of shows. Yeah. Um,
Love it.
what do you dream of for the future of the industry?
I want to see the industry fully reflect and embrace all of us in our multitudes. So often, those of us who've been pushed to the margins have to squinch and screech and screech ourselves in order to fit into a paradigm that is maintained by the mainstream ideal. And I dream of an industry where we can be in our multitudes and our multifaceted. You know, when we hear representation matters, that it's not just a face, that it's actually the stories of all of us in a way that I would just, there's money there. It's not about money. There is money there. It's not about money. So to see whatever the other elements that are suppressing our dynamic stories from across the multitudes of who and how we are, I'd love to see the industry look like that and do that and embrace that and be centered there versus it being an alternate or an other.
Yeah, I gotta second that. That's definitely the dream. I think to tell stories from all different points of view, to trust the audience, to watch it,
Mm,
to enjoy it, to
mm,
want to see it. I don't know how many more examples we need to give them, that these stories work, that there is a world outside of America, that you know we want to know all those stories. We don't have to look a certain way to be relatable. We're honestly all relatable. And I can't wait for that world where I can, what I loved about television, and I was always a television head. I was never like a film person. Also immigrant. We didn't have money, so my parents didn't take us to movies. I only watched TV, and television taught me about the world. I grew up in a very insular house, overprotective dad, conservative. I wasn't allowed to go out. I wasn't allowed to do things. And there was dysfunction at home, and television, I always say, saved my life. Like comedy saved my life. And I learned about people and the world and how we could be and how we weren't that different. I was like, "Oh, wait, like this dynamic kind of feels like my dynamic at home, and that's crazy because I'm like an immigrant kid. Like how, but we're all the same. Relationships are all the same around the world. So I wish that we could pass that on to future generations so that they can see all different types of stories being represented and see themselves on screen and their stories told.
As has been the case this whole conversation, so much overlap because also like very rarely went to films to see movies. There's so many movies that people reference like the quote unquote classics, and I'm like, I don't know it. I know I'm supposed to, but I'm not gonna go see it. Like I just TV was right there. It was accessible. It was less monitorable by my parents, right? Because they're like, we don't know what these people are trying to put in you. And so, I got away with like watching things on TV that like, there's no way my parents would have been okay with me seeing that in a movie theater or even knowing, what I was watching. And to find the universality in specificity has been such a life force for me as a creative. And even, going through theater and independent film and sketch and comedy and improvisation, like all these things, all of that has been sort of guided by this, sort of central core of there's so many stories that we can tell and that our stories have a universality about them, even in their specificity. So I love that. That's where we're landing as we, sort of come to the wrap up of this conversation.
Yeah, this was such a great conversation, Chandra. I've known you for a while now, but this was such a great deep dive. I always knew we had a lot in common, but this was like, I'm like, oh damn, we're like sisters here. I was like, I feel like we grew up in the same house.
I love this for us.
I love it, and I'm sure I'm going to see you on a picket line. You're going to be out there, so thank you again, Miss Captain, and for everything that you're doing for us. Thanks.
And thank you, girlie. Like every time I get to see you, as you said, we've known each other for a while. You always infuse just such like light and joy every time that I see you. And so it's always what a delight to get to like, turn off the other things and just for us to like talk and catch up. And hopefully many people are eavesdropping on us at this point.
Thanks for listening to Forte. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe for new episodes and follow @FortePod on Instagram for the latest updates and bonus content from today's guests. The Forte podcast is a production of Maestro Filmworks and is filmed and recorded at Symphony Studio in Philadelphia.